On this edition of Dumb Facts, we find out if Nicolas Cage even likes Superman. Also, did he really buy a stolen skull? And who was the D-list celebrity that bailed Cage out of jail? These and other dumb facts are coming your way. First, let's start this party right from the beginning. Nicolas Cage was born January 7th, 1964. His real name is Nicholas Kim Coppola. You might recognize that last name, Coppola, because his uncle is the famous director Francis Ford Coppola, who made such great films as The Godfather and my personal favorite, Apocalypse Now. Why would Nick Cage change his name from Coppola to Cage? Especially when his uncle is one of the greatest movie makers ever and has the Coppola name? Well, Nick Cage didn't like the appearance of nepotism, so he changed his name. Where did he get his name, Cage? He actually got it from a comic character, Luke Cage. Turns out Nick Cage is very big into comics, and I'll cover that in depth. Three things that tell us Nick Cage loves comics. Our first fact that tells us Nick loves comics is that he has played numerous comic book characters during his career. Most famously in 2007 he played Ghost Rider, and then he played the same character again in the sequel in 2012. Ghost Rider is a comic book character that was created in 1972 and is one of the numerous comic book movie franchises owned by Marvel Comics. Fact 2 that tells us Nick Cage is a big comics book fan. He's actually written his own comic book. It's called Voodoo Child, which he co-wrote with his son Weston. The third fact that tells us Nick is a big comic nerd is that he made over $1.6 million selling a collection of his own comics. That's a ton of money that he had to have spent on comics. Who but a real fan is going to blow $1.5 million on comics? Nick Cage would. We have established Nick Cage loves comics, but who is his favorite comic character? Could it be Superman? Let's look at the dumb facts. These are three things that tell us just how much Nicholas loves Superman. Fact number one. Nick had a super rare issue of Superman. It was Action Comics number one, and it is among the rarest comics on Earth. If you were lucky enough to spot this particular comic at a garage sale, you could resell it for over $3.2 million. Why would anyone go out of their way to pay for a comic this rare and pricey? They would have to be a pretty big fan. They would also probably be terrible with money and a huge Superman fan. What's the second thing that tells us Cage is a Superman fan? Well, he named his kid Kal-El. If you don't know the significance here, then you probably are not a nerd. He named his kid after Superman's Kryptonian name. He could have maybe named the kid Clark Kent. Instead, he went with the alien name, Kal-El. Nick is all in on Superman. The third thing that Nick Cage did that tells us he is a huge fan of Superman is that he almost starred in a Superman movie. It didn't go too far into production, but it went far enough that they had the suit done up nicely. Can you imagine some low-rent actor playing Lex Luger battling Nick Cage? I think I see why they decided to put a stop to that movie. What was Cage thinking? I could say he was thinking that a real Superman fan could play that role best. Comics turned out to be an interesting rabbit hole. Away from the comics, Cage doesn't always act like a superhero, but then who does? Let's take a brief look at his acting. In his career as an actor, Nicolas Cage has a Metacritic score of 48 out of 100. And that's lower than most of the actors that have won an Oscar for Best Actor. just like Nicolas Cage has. Looking at some of his contemporaries, currently Tom Hanks has a Metascore of 63, Jack Nicholson has 66, Russell Crowe has 58, Denzel Washington has 61, and Sean Penn has a score of 60. Keep in mind that's comparing it to a score of 48 for the career of Nicolas Cage. What is the cause of Cage having a lower overall critical rating than his peers? Is there a reason to believe this rumor that he takes movies for the money these days rather than he did it more so in his younger days? Is he just unlucky in the movies he picks? Well, that's all speculation. If you like Nick Cage's acting or not, that's up to you. Personally, there are some movies that I don't mind and others that are pretty bad. Um, Looking at Cage's personal life, he spends money like it's going out of style. At one time, he owned upwards of 15 homes, including two castles in Europe and a deserted island in the Bahamas. But what's the strangest thing he ever purchased? Some people might say that the strangest things he's ever purchased were the octopus that he purchased as a pet, or the shrunken pygmy heads. However, I think it's the stolen skull that is the strangest thing he ever purchased. It was around 2007 when Cage outbid actor Leonardo DiCaprio for a dinosaur skull. The skull was that of a Tarbosaurus. He paid close to $300,000 for it. However, it turned out it was a stolen artifact. He wound up returning it to the rightful owners, the Mongolian government. I'm sure we've all bought something and then regretted it later. Maybe not a dinosaur skull for $300,000 that turned out to be stolen, but you know what I'm getting at. Here's one last dumb fact I'll leave you with. In 2011, Nicolas Cage was with his wife in New Orleans and they were drinking and having a good time, but maybe just a bit too good of a time. Nicolas Cage wound up getting arrested for drunken disorderly. Guess who the famous D-list celebrity was that bailed him out? It was none other than Dog the Bounty Hunter. Now, can you say you've really lived unless you've been bailed out by Dog the Bounty Hunter? I don't think so. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe and have yourself a great day.